source from which all things come. Security blanket for the stars. Understand what black is. It's not a color, it's the basis of all colors. It is not a complexion, it is a reflection of all complexions called human. And out of this blackness, passion flows like a river. Feelings tell the truth. Song and dance and making you laugh are family members. Understand what black is. The breath you breathe, the sweat on your brow, the cheers and the tears balancing the world on your head.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Harry, good morning to you, and good morning to Marcella Nunez-Smith, and good morning to Maurice Williams is with us. Maurice Scott Williams is with us. Oh, that's a unique pleasure. Harry, I want to thank you for just being so consistent as the station manager for WNHH, and we're starting a few minutes late, but it's interesting in terms of what does really lateness mean. It's tomorrow in Australia. If we were putting on the international date line, would there be some dispute about what day it is? And even when we go through like Eastern time and Central time and West Coast time, it's fascinating. Even people on the Zoom call, as everyone registered, you saw the various, whatever country you're calling from. And the reason I kind of I'm talking about time is my intro, because Marcella and Maurice, in my mind, historians might note this period. 50 years from now, we might be talking about AC and BC, a BC rather, and AC, before COVID and after COVID. In some ways, for better or for worse, this experience that we're encountering right now, this history making, her story making experience that we're all living in, might be a demarcation and a definition of the future for the next 2,000 years in my mind, Marcella. That might seem overly dramatic, but when you think about polio and mumps and the Black Plague and measles and Ebola and HIV, we may just be getting, from an evolutionary biology standpoint, just getting a handle on how bacteria, germs, etc., have really dictated and defined our existence on the planet. I'm not sure, Marcella, before we get into the topic, and Maurice, if dinosaurs died because of some infection or viral disease. But if you think about the planets on the species on the Earth that have existed and the ones that have passed away, bacteria and viruses seem to be the ones that have the most lifespan. I mean, they rather than if we want to call us our two animals that can walk on two legs that can talk. But we're going to try to bring it home a little bit, everybody. But I referenced that metaphorical and historical moment and evolutionary biology moment because in my mind, we really are we hear this word pandemic and even global world war, but it's beyond that in my mind. I'm in a mood, folks, and I've done this show. This is my 6th year. The station started 6 years ago, so congratulations to WNHH, everybody, right? Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. Congratulations.
But it's a new departure for my mind. And when I do the shows now in the last 7 weeks, it just dawns on me that we're on a precarious cliff of existence. And if I'm overly dramatic, if I'm wrong, if we have a vaccine tomorrow, if COVID walks away from us this afternoon, accuse me to be, I guess an overly sensational dramatist. On the other hand, I really feel that we can't dismiss what might be lingering in our midst this moment and what might be lingering in our midst for the rest of our existence on this planet, and for that matter, even on other planets. So without going on further, because I do believe I did invite you guys to be on the show, and this was not to be a soliloquy. My guest this morning are Marcella Nunez-Smith, and Marcella was challenging me in terms of what her title was, and I was challenging her in what her title was, and then it turned to me that it's not just a singular, but the plural. So we could spend the next 48 minutes talking about why she has 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 titles.
That's not.
Plus, but she is the associate professor in general internal medicine, public health and management at Yale. She is a doctor in internal medicine. And Maurice Many of you may know Maurice Williams from the local standpoint and statewide standpoint. I've gotten a chance to know this young man who's just celebrated his, I think, your 48th birthday. Is that correct, Maurice?
Coming up, 49.
Or 49th birthday coming up in a variety of ways. Your official title, the IRS considers you to, what's on your check or when you file your income tax? What does your title say at that point?
Oh, from Community Liaison Coordinator. So that's my official title, and I work for the School of Medicine, Yale Center of Clinical Investigation.
And it seems to me that Maurice has been for pretty much, and you're born in New Haven, correct?
Yes.
And Marcella, by the way, where were you born?
Well, good morning to you, Tom. And I was born in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but
Okay.
I've been here in New Haven. It's coming up in 16 years.
Great. So yeah, so we have a global presence, a local presence, and many of you may know. You heard Maurice. Repeat your title again. I'll tell you why.
Community Liaison Coordinator.
And you've been there for how long?
Currently 7 years, but in the whole profession, 17 years.
And prior to that, almost 2 decades. In my mind, Maurice, you've been a community liaison person pretty much most of your life.
Yes.
Everything you've done, where you've been willingly, where you've been unwillingly, it's been how to commune with other people, share information for better or for worse, and just and organize things. And so I want to salute you that your title is long overdue. That's a title that you've been embedding and illustrating for most of your life. But let's jump in. We're going to talk today to everybody about COVID. Maurice is going to share some of his personal experiences. And I really want to thank you for being so transparent and honest and sharing how because you've gone through this literally life and death experience. We're going to talk about the importance of COVID-19 in terms of testing, new testing technologies, vaccines. People have a lot to tweet about and hesitancy about confidence in vaccines once they become available. The misinformation is gargantuan. The misinformation out here is gargantuan, is voluminous, is off the charts, is off the hook. And whether you believe what we're going to say during the show or not, that's up to you. But I get just so glad that we could at least begin, Marcella, to begin to kind of fight this media war. We're involved with a media war in terms of what is truth, particularly in terms of health and health equity and other matters. And then the importance of the influenza vaccine this year. It's August, but September, October, November is coming.
That's right.
And to reiterate the importance of something as simple in one way of just wearing a piece of cloth over your mouth, just your mouth and nose. So, should we start with Maurice, perhaps, Marcella, just to kind of set the stage a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm really just thrilled Maurice is here. So good morning, Maurice. Always great to see you.
Maurice, good. Now, you and I have talked off air, so we know we both can be long-winded. I'm going to give you 3 to 5 minutes for the intro statement about your experience.
Okay.
And I say that tongue-in-cheek because we talked about a movie about your experience, a play about your how many days were you in the hospital plus convalescence?
Okay, so I was officially in the hospital for 36 days at Yale New Haven Hospital facilities. And then I did 7 days for rehab because after, of course, laying in the bed for about 36 days, your body and your bones and your leg movements are all now kind of null and void, and you have to reactivate all of that. So that took about 7 full days, and that was in the New Haven Rehabilitation Center.
So let's chat for Marcel. Let's just chat give Maurice the floor for another 3 or 4 minutes about that experience, because again, we've talked about your experience and your background prior in terms of being a health equity. I'm gonna call you health equity, not savage, but a health equity warrior. Health equity warrior.
Thank you.
That before, during, and even afterwards. So share a little bit more about that experience and why it might or might not be so important for people to recognize the reality, the ominous and or cautious or proactive reality that we should become actors in.
Well, the main thing I would say is for someone that is related in the health field, it would have definitely been a shock to acquire COVID, because you would figure that I would know some of the precautions and the different things that should be taking place. But once again, we're living in a social world, and we're associating with individuals and going different places, and it wasn't as serious in the mind frame or the mindset at that time. So it definitely was a shock to go through such an experience where it is a near death experience in my particular case. Maybe it does have a lot to do with underlying um, things that I have. I'm a diabetic, and so there's still a lot of research being done on specifics, but we could take it that a lot of Black and Brown individuals in our community do have underlying conditions, so that COVID can magnify that if it is acquired by an individual. So to be in a hospital bed, being administered medicine over 36 days. And also, the main part I think a lot of people don't think about is the mental side of it, because of the fact that you can't have any visitors. Probably for the first 2 weeks between being transferred from the emergency room to ICU, my phone was misplaced. So you got to put that in mind too. So it's about a good 14 days. I had no contact with anyone. And so, that's a part of you as a mental individual, that you have to be strong, and you have to believe that everything is going to be okay, even though at many times during this stay it was very grim.
And again, everyone, this is the Tom Ficklin Show. Marcella Nunez Smith is with us, and Maurice Scott Williams. Marcella, did you hear Maurice say just transferred to ICU?
Yes.
It seems to me that people don't necessarily desire to be transferred to ICU, and sometimes they don't have a choice about. It's not their choice to make. So, and that's kind of a reflection in my mind of your personality and your kindness and lovingness. So you were, Marcella. What's the correct words? The medical profession. The people that were attending to him from a medical standpoint decided that his life was even further at risk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, more, it's, I just have to pause for a second, because it is an amazing gift and blessing that we still have Maurice. And, he will tell you, as he was just sharing, that he was very ill, and critically ill. And there were days when we were all just worried if Maurice would make it. And so, when he talks about being transferred to the intensive care unit and the ICU, that is a sign of just, how sick he was. COVID-19 affects all the organs, all the systems. This we've learned. It's more than just a respiratory or lung condition. And so it can be very vicious in its attack on the human body, and the consequences, can be far more extensive than people think. And there's just, I really think it's great to have Maurice here sharing his own personal experience, because I think he's absolutely right. There are many people who still aren't taking this seriously enough, who think that they themselves might not be vulnerable. And the reality is that this is very much a virus that is opportunistic, and different, people respond differently. And so there isn't anybody out there who should feel that they are beyond the effects of COVID-19 and what it can do. And I'm just grateful for this chance to be in conversation about what everybody can do to protect themselves, to protect each other, and to learn really from what Maurice went through.
And Marcella, just before we go, take more of a deeper dive in terms of the importance of testing and vaccines and information and the flu season coming up, and masks. Maurice, share a little more, because once the word got out that you were hospitalized, I would say, as many people might know, by doing the Tom Ficklin Show for 6 years and being involved with the inner city newspaper for 10 years and working with Empower New Haven, and so just being kind of somewhat connected with community news. The news, Marcella, of Maurice's hospitalization, I've never seen such this is a bad expression, but viral sharing. And the news came from, and this is going to sound like caste and class statement, but from every demographic and aspect of society. Black, white, red, green, yellow, rich, white, poor, racist, non-racist, anti-racist, people that just don't know what the words mean. It was remarkable about the love. So Maurice, I'm telling you, man, if you had passed away, we would have all been. Uh, there would not be enough antidepressant pills in New Haven to have been given to people. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you right now to your face. 1-11-21 that love that. And so again, but just share a little more about, because you were on the ventilator. And Marcella, I want to come back to you when I do, about internal medicine. This was I mean, you know about how all these organs work. So just to elaborate,
Absolutely.
on that we're calling something. In fact, we're calling it COVID now, COVID-19. But we might even, Marcella, in terms of medical terminology, come up with a more comprehensive term. But I digress. But Maurice, you share a little more, and also about how you're feeling now. And you mentioned your pre-existing condition. So just if you could, I want to give you the platform for a few more minutes.
Okay, so as we look at now, okay, you're about 2 months out of the hospital. Things are going well. I'm very happy and appreciative. Definitely want to be very appreciative to our city. Many people prayed. Many people were very worried. And, you know, it was a good feeling of knowing that being in the community, the roles I've played in this local community, always tried to show love to each and every one of the people I meet, to help them to see the need for us, because they never know when a time may come where you may need someone. It might just be, and in this particular situation, it probably could only be a prayer and a well wish. But when it comes from so many, it makes you really feel appreciated. The staff was excellent. I definitely have to give thanks to Marcella. She was very supportive of my family. She was making sure that they could get updates from the doctors on a daily basis, which probably, in all honesty, didn't happen for probably every person in that situation. The staff and my hired directs at my job, they did all they can to make sure it was comfortable for me and my family. You know, calls were coming in from individuals that you wouldn't really believe, took the time to really make sure that the staff knew that, you know, the work that's being done, this person is involved in this work of sharing out to the community and letting them know the medical messages that need to happen in the community, especially in Black and brown communities, when we know we're controlled right now by social media. We hope at some time that we'll get back to direct talking and communication, which is the essence of village families and village thought. And so we're hoping these types of situations help us to understand that the need for communication and staying in touch with people, saying hi when you see them on the street, wishing them well, but also, as you noted and talked about, wearing that mask as a love and protection, not only for yourself, but for others. And I think that's the most important message, because a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm 6 feet away from a person, or I don't have any symptoms, and that's the worst part. And that's part of the myths that are out here that we're trying to get people to understand, is that a person can be asymptomatic, which means they're not going to show any symptoms, and they have COVID, and they can pass it on to you if you're not wearing a mask, if you're not keeping your social distancing. So it's a very important message that we want the community to understand. I was trying to explain to one of our fellows about, he said, Morris, how can I best explain it to someone so that they can really get the effect of how serious it is? So in New Haven, we have about 137,000 residents here. And just last week in the United States, we went over 150,000 deaths due to COVID. So just imagine waking up one day in New Haven and everywhere you went, whether it was the grocery store, whether it was to a school, whether it was to a basketball court, wherever you went and walking around New Haven, you saw dead bodies. And would that affect you differently when you understand 137,000 people in a small city like New Haven? The whole city would have been wiped out if we look at comparing that to the numbers of 150,000 people who died throughout the country. And I just like to, for it to be vivid for people to realize how serious it is that you can be that close. And, I'm fortunate in the grace of God, I'm here. But the thought is that not many people, once they reach a ventilator, really come off from to be able to stand up again in front of family and friends in the community. So normally when that part happens, some of the writing off of your life starts, and it really can be tragic. So we really want the people out in the community to really be aware of their surroundings. This is a virus. You can touch a doorknob. You can go into a room where someone has sneezed 10 minutes ago. It's that easy. Most times we think about things like diseases, like, for example, if we're talking about lung cancer, we know a lot of people who attract lung cancer comes from smoking cigarettes. So that's a bad habit, and that leads to a consequence that we don't want. But in this particular case with COVID, you don't have to have any major bad habits. You don't have to do anything special. A handshake, like I said, touching a doorknob. Those are the things of how this is being transferred in our community. And so that's why it's a need for us to take it very serious, because it is not something major that you have to do to attract.
Excellent. Marcel, I think I better have Maurice come on another show.
Yes, I would advise that.
All right. I accept
he is a wealth of knowledge.
I accept your Marcella. And so Maurice has talked about, he's lifted up let's discuss the importance of COVID-19 testing. And also, it's COVID-19. Does that mean we're going to have COVID-20, COVID-21, COVID-22 people? There's so many linguistic symbolisms and that are striking me as we have this discussion. But let's talk about the importance of COVID-19 testing and new testing technologies that might be on the horizon.
Absolutely. So, so as you mentioned, right, the language landscape can get a little confusing. What we are talking about, of course, is the novel coronavirus. So people, I think at this point will have heard that, there's a family of coronaviruses, and that many of the common cold symptoms we've all experienced, are caused by coronaviruses. This is a unique novel coronavirus, and it goes by the name SARS-CoV-2. So if you hear that, that's the virus itself. COVID-19 is the clinical syndrome that can be caused by SARS-CoV-2. And of course, the 19 is because of 2019 and when it was first sort of described. So, COVID-19 runs the spectrum. That was Maurice's point. And it is a very complex interplay in terms of the virus and the host, that is the person who gets infected. And that's where science is trying to move rapidly to determine, can we better figure out prognostically who will do worse or who will, quote unquote, do better, have a milder case. Really what we worry about in the healthcare system is severe COVID-19 infection, which is what Maurice had. That requires hospitalization, can require intensive care treatment. And so when we worry about the healthcare system being overwhelmed, it's because of the severity and severe cases. But because it's still unknown around kind of who will progress to severity, what we have in our toolkit is prevention, right? And that is the number one take home, is that this is not something you want to try to catch. I've heard people say things like, I'm going to try to catch this so I can get an immunity passport. And so that way I'll be able to move around freely and I can show people. And I just want to debunk that, right? That's some of the myths that's out there. There's nothing that we know that should make any person feel kind of better, less at risk than the next person. And to Maurice's point about collective responsibility, the real risk are people who don't have any symptoms, but are contagious. And we think that almost 40% of cases of people who've been infected are people who will never develop symptoms, but are actively shedding and spreading.
And say that again, Marcella.
Yes, I will say it again. So
I've heard it so many times. Just the mind cannot. We're not trained to process that information. That we feel we're healthy, but we're also
yes. This is why this is such a stealth virus. right? Because, if we had a virus that what people are used to is, oh, I am infected with a virus, I feel sick, and just by nature feeling sick, I'm going to stay away from other people, I'll be staying home. And so people are very used to this idea of I'm feeling fine. I hear people say this all the time, even people in my friend circle who are like, oh, can we come over? All of us are feeling fine. And the answer is no. You may not come over to my house, because this is not about how you're feeling. And this is why testing is so important. It's so critical. And so we've moved on. We have testing available so that, if people are unable to be socially distanced, for example, I understand, of course, that folks have to go to work, have to move through the world. But to be getting tested, that's our responsibility, all of us, to get tested. And then when we get the results, to act on the results. And if we find to be positive, it doesn't matter how we're feeling, right? We're still contagious, and it's our obligation to separate ourselves from other folks. So I'm grateful to have an opportunity to come here and talk about things on the horizon that will make the testing process more simple. But that one takeaway is huge. 40% of people who are infected will never, ever show a symptom, but are actively spreading that entire time.
And then you mentioned, and thank you so much. And then you mentioned also about, I mean, not that you're a prophet or a prophetess, but there are some new testing technologies on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. So people will have now seen the images. Maurice is all too familiar with this, of how we test for infection with SARS-CoV-2, right? The classic is that we take a long swab with a little cotton tip. Somebody else has to insert that, sort of a little far back in the nose. We call that the nasopharyngeal area. So the NP swab, and then that test sort of gets, processed. And so technological advances in all parts of this and how we can collect that sample. Even, right now, many testing centers will allow you to collect your own sample. So you will get a swab that is a nasal swab, not a nasal pharyngeal swab. And so you can self-administer it right sort of at the sort of opening the nares of your nose and hand that back to them. And that can be a little bit better tolerated for some people as a test. We know that there's saliva testing that's coming online, FDA is approving, and so that people will be able to literally sort of like spit, and none of the necessary kind of for other people to put on all that fancy PPE equipment in order to get the test. And then we know the test turnaround times are going to get faster, right? And so that there are new technologies so that we can get faster results. So all of these developments, I mean, this is real time. I don't have to be a prophetess, because this is well in the development and approval pipeline, all these different things that will make testing more available and easier for people to get.
But in today, as of this moment at 11:33 and 41 seconds, we should maximize, take advantage of, be smart, proactive with what's available to us right now. So you're suggesting that everyone should everyone have whatever tests are available to them today, this moment, take it.
Yeah, really encouraging, particularly people who are living in communities where the spread is high, and those who, because of work and other obligations, are unable to socially distance, to get tested and to take advantage of the available testing. And of course, none of this replaces, I just have to lift up what Maurice says, none of this replaces all the things we know to do already, like wearing the face coverings, wearing that appropriately over your nose and mouth, making sure that you have a good, strong face covering on, maintaining social distance, washing your hands frequently. So none of this replaces that, right? And it won't, basically. But that there will be more opportunities for testing coming online, but we have capacity now. And I encourage people, who are in the sound of our voices, to get tested.
And Marcella, before we go to the vaccine, because that's a controversial issue, Maurice, I guess wanted to kind of reflect on a comment you made to me when you were undergoing your John the Baptist experience, your Damascus Road experience, your in fact, are you going to change your name to El Hajj Malik now that you've gone to Mecca and back?
You're gonna do MSW 45, not like the other 45.
Marcel, Maurice had mentioned to me that in the hospital bed, in the hospital room, I think, Maurice, you mentioned that there was a patient that did not have insurance,
Mm.
and he or she had to leave before receiving full treatment. Is that, you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I was at the time when I was in rehab, and everyone on the floor were COVID patients, and my particular roommate was announced that he was leaving the next day. And so I started to get excited for him until I started hearing the undercurrent conversations that he felt as though he was being kicked out. And it's one of those things that is very affecting the Black and Brown communities, and we have to be very careful of that thought. And so it's very important for people to be insured, and that so that if anything was to happen as far as acquiring COVID, that you would be able to maximize the full opportunities of any of medical treatment that you can have. Because at that particular point, I had finished the rehab part to where I didn't need to be assisted to walk, but this particular gentleman didn't. And so that's how I knew in the back of my mind. It seemed kind of strange that he was going home the next day, and I wanted to be excited. But like, once again, after hearing the other conversations, I realized it was due to not being able to financially take care of the stay.
And Marcel, I wanted Maurice to raise that because we're still living in a political system, an economic system, an infrastructure system, a service delivery system. In spite of this global, what I'm calling the global world war, we all are potential enemies of one another. In fact, we're potential murderers of one another unless we are proactive and understand what safety is about. But still, we're operating, use that expression, in this environment that might be disparate in terms of people's access. And in fact, before we go to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Marcella.
No, I just was going to echo that. I mean, one of the things that I think we have to reckon with is that the United States, in contrast to our global peers, we do not ensure that all of our residents have access. And in this country, access is really primarily through having insurance and insurance coverage. And that is a big driver in terms of the disparities. I mean, this Tom and Maurice that I frequently am asked to talk about, why do we see the disparities in Black and Brown communities? And I always remind people to resist any urge to think that there is something genetically, biologically different between races. That's been debunked. That we know that this is about social factors and social systems and structures that have been in place for generations, right? And this is the outcome, sadly, we could expect. And so we know that already pre-pandemic rates of insurance and access are lower for Black and Brown people. And when they have access, it's often access to lower quality care because our care systems are also segregated and lower resources funnel into the hospitals and systems that take care of predominantly patients of color. So Maurice is right. For the individual patient, we have seen already in COVID-19 times that not having insurance makes them delay care seeking. And so someone might be worried about getting a bill, for example, for getting tested. So I'm here to say that should not happen, right? But people worry so they don't get tested, or they're scared to go to the hospital because they are afraid they're going to get a bill that they have to pay. And this is threatening all our public health, right? So the tragedy that unfolds for that person, that family, but also the reality, right, that we're not able to tap down and do the public health things because they rather not know, right? They rather not go seek care, and they're moving in the world and affecting other people. We're all in this together. When you say it's a global war, I think that it is this moment where we can recognize how much our lives are dependent on the well-being of other people, right? This isn't a problem over there, those people, right? This is our problem. And the insurance is just one slice of sort of how the social realities play out in the pandemic.
Excellent. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Marcella Nunez-Smith is with me, and Maurice Scott Williams, as well as the folks from, a shout out to the folks from Project Access. Thank you also for joining. And that reminds me, Marcella, Maurice, that you Project Access folks, we're going to get you on the show soon also. I mean, you've just sparked me in terms of an October date in November, because in my mind, this, whatever we want to call this COVID era, is the front page news for in my mind, the next 5 years. When you think of airplane pilots being laid off, and you think of Ann Taylor closing, the stores closing, just the economic impact. This is going to be the worst economic, from just a strictly economic standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm predicting 7 years of the worst pandemic in terms of our lifestyle and economic sustenance ever existed. I mean, way beyond the so-called Great Depression. So there's so many aspects that I'm just so pleased to do this show. Marcella, just before we go, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just was going to I also give a shout out to Project Access and the Project Access team and all the great work that they are doing. I'm a proud member of the board for Project Access. And, as we're having this conversation about insurance, right here joining us today are people with a lot of expertise about helping our neighbors and residents get access to healthcare when needed. So, so just heroic, great work done by the entire Project Access team. Want to lift that up.
Excellent. We have about 14 or 15 minutes. Let's talk about COVID-19 vaccine and
Maurice
and the SNC. I want to talk a little bit more about counter information and the importance of influenza, and again reiterating the importance of wearing your mask. But vaccine confidence, hesitancy. Yes. I mean, even if a person has never picked up the New York Times or Al Jazeera or never looked at CNN, they probably heard about Bill Gates and the vaccine controversy. Even if they have an 8th grade reading, and I'm not being judgmental, the rumors, the innuendos, the messaging across the board about vaccines and who made profit and the viability and the applicability and the need and the efficacy. We're just in the early stage of this messaging. Yeah. So before I go to Maurice, let's have a state our position about COVID-19 vaccine confidence and people's hesitancy and whether they should take it or not once it becomes available.
Absolutely, Tom. This critical topic, and I hope we can continue this conversation because I know, listeners and others will have questions, and we want to be sure that people have the right information moving forward. So we all know that we're fixated on this vaccine timeline. That is our best hope for anything resembling our pre-pandemic lives and reality, and so we have a lot of eyes on that. People will have heard, as you said, that vaccines typically take years to develop, 4 or 5 years to develop and go through all the testing. And we're looking at some unprecedented timelines in terms of having viable vaccine candidates, in sort of under a year since the global pandemic started. And so it's understandable that people hear those 2 bits of information and pause. In terms of national data, we see the Black and Brown people, about 30% express having vaccine confidence and expressing an intent to take the vaccine. That's 30%, right? It's very low. But often the other part of that story is all comers is about 50%, regardless of race, ethnicity, political party, socioeconomic status. So that's half. And if we think about what the vaccine is intended to accomplish, right, which is moving us towards the notion of herd immunity, we have to get up into vaccine confidence levels approaching 80% or higher for us to have benefit. So when we see those survey numbers, like 30%, 50%, we're still a ways away. So I think it's very important for everyone to know that we can see this aggressive timeline with the vaccines, not because there are shortcuts being made. Every rigor step is still in place at the FDA for approval, but because there's just unprecedented investment of resources and focus on this. So I'm very hopeful that we will have not one, but several vaccine candidates that are effective, that can be disseminated and deployed. But I know this is a very, very active space for conversation and that we need to hear one another out and have vigorous, discussion and even potentially debate about this.
Nice try, Marcelo. Should people once it becomes
yes, people should get the vaccine. Oh yes, no. I'm not trying to walk away from my position.
Your position is 100% each and every walking body.
My position, and this will allow me to have an opportunity to talk about something else, because the way that we think as physicians about kind of who are vaccines for and who are medicines for, and the way we can reliably recommend them is who was part of the development of those therapeutics and vaccines. So we need diversity in the clinical trials. that are bringing these vaccines to market so that we can, with good confidence, talk about them being fit and suitable for everyone. But that's where we have to move towards. I just said, the herd immunity is our goal. We need to get upwards of 70-80% of people taking the vaccine. Every vaccine is not for everybody. We know that there are, but I'm talking more about kind of medical contraindications to people taking the vaccine. So we need to protect those people for whom taking a vaccine itself presents a potential risk. But same thing as I say for influenza, right? We have to take the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is for everybody 6 months and older. And we have to be able to, we have the threat of dual pandemics coming this fall with flu and COVID-19. So what we can do now for sure is get ready for the flu vaccine. I'll be here by the end of the month, early September. The state has a great supply chain for that, so everyone can take it. And then, hopefully not too long after, we'll have the opportunity for COVID-19 wide distribution. And yes, I endorse uptake of the vaccines once available.
Maurice, we've set the stage for you. Marcella's going to come over and give you the vaccine.
Yes.
Personally.
I'm going to have the flu. I'm going to have the flu vaccine for you first, though, Maurice.
Vaccine first. I will be second. Everyone from Project Access will. So, Maurice, and again, I'm kind of joking because it is in the final analysis, in some ways, it's a personal decision, but also it could be a collective responsibility in what does freedom mean? Freedom to live a healthy life. Does your freedom kind of trump, to use that really bad word, trump other people's experiences? But Maurice, vaccines, talk to me.
My thought is always for an individual to have educational medical information. And as a clinical research coordinator, that's what my purpose is, to make sure, especially people of Black and Brown communities, have the information so that they can make an educational medical decision. And like you said, it does come down to where it becomes personal. But as my mom always told me, the best thing is when you do something that you take the accountability for it. So what we like is that when individuals make a medical decision, and whether it's plus or minus, what the effect may be, is that you took the accountability for the decision that you made. And the best thing is to make sure that you're well informed about the decision. And Marcella can tell you that's why even if a person was in a trial, you have a consent form, which we go over every information about that particular medicine before it is administered to you. And at any time, you can back out of a particular trial. Anything is still always your accountability, but you want to be make sure that you have the information on it completely, and not going on myths, not going on what you heard about hundreds of years ago, or even if it was 50 or 60 years ago, but that you're really taking the time to do the research yourself. I'll never forget, I was doing a project when I was working at Griffin Hospital, and a particular person that was part of the diabetes group that we were working with, it was a particular older lady in Bridgeport area. And she came to me almost in tears. And after giving a presentation, she said, Maurice, I take about 32 medicines a day, and it has a wear and tear on me almost every day I get up. Sometimes I dread the next day because I have to take so many medicines. So what I advised her was to sit with her physician. And also, when you go to the pharmacy, a lot of people don't know, you're able to read about each one of those drugs if you want to, if you choose to. And so, long story short, after consulting with her physician and doing some background research, she was able to get that down to maybe about 8-9 pills a day. And every time we were having monthly meetings, every time I came to the meeting, she just was so happy to see me and wanted to thank me and how her life had changed, and she did the research and understood medically. And that's just my thought. I know in our community, especially Black and Brown, it's very controversial. It's a lot being said. I saw you, Tom, put some stuff on Facebook. People responding, would they take it or not? One part that I didn't like is if it's a personal decision to take it plus or minus, that is your decision. But don't base your decision on someone else, because a lot of people's answer was, oh, I'll wait till the first 100,000 people do it. Let me see how it goes. And if it don't go, that's not a educated medical decision that you're making there. You're basing it on someone else. And so everybody has to take their individual accountability and make sure you learn about it, make sure you read about it, make sure you cross-reference. There's so much you can do to learn for your specific knowledge for yourself, and then once again make a educated medical decision based on the information that you have.
Excellent. Marcelo?
Yeah, no, as a smart person should, I agree with Maurice, and and obviously he said it perfectly. I mean, that's the thing that we have to make sure is that people have the accurate, right information. And I've been on a lot of conversation.
Where does a person go for the accurate, right information other than the Tom Ficklin?
I was going to say, well, first you stop at the Tom Ficklin show, right? But Maurice, this is a conversation we want to have as people's providers. Yeah. And when you know that there are still sites to be trusted, such as the CDC, they still are putting out accurate information. Identify your trusted news sources, right? You're not going to go wrong coming to Tom and other leading organizations that are vetting their work, right? But remember that your provider is here, and so this is again important why people should have a primary care provider, why we need to make sure people have insurance and access so that they can have these conversations, get their questions asked by their clinical provider. I'm really excited that Maurice mentioned things like consent, because I know a lot of the conversations I've been in with reporters, we end up talking about things like experimentation, and violence towards Black and brown bodies in medicine, and all of that is real. I think what we don't often disseminate as far as accurate information is how these very egregious things, whether it's Tuskegee or sterilization in Puerto Rico or any of the medical experimentation stories in our not so distant past, but that it's a very different process now in terms of getting involved with research and all the protections that are in place, all the consent that occurs, so that there is accountability within the research system and enterprise and trial landscape, so that precisely to prevent experimentation. So the thing that makes me probably sad is when people say, I'm not going to be part of this vaccine experimentation. I want us to get that language kind of out of our collective lexicon. We are talking about communities that are really disproportionately hit and suffering from COVID-19. And when a vaccine is available, I think it'd be very sad if folks are, not willing, and particularly not willing because they don't have the right information to make an informed choice.
And just as you were talking, Marcella and Maurice, if someone, just to shift the topic just for a few seconds as we conclude, we have another 4 or 5 minutes. If someone's interested, even if COVID-19 hadn't appeared on our horizon, clinical trials would still be ongoing. So if someone, and we know our Black and brown participation has not been as great as we would like it to be. If someone wants more information just moving forward about how to participate in the clinical trial, how to share information about it, where should they go to explore? Because this medical research, to use that kind of common word, is going to continue, and hopefully it'll be medical research, as you've alluded to, for everyone's benefit. But trials, drug formulations, the future of medicines and pharmacology, et cetera. So if someone wants to be involved or to participate in this scientific discovery method, where should they go? How can they find out about participation in terms of clinical trials?
Absolutely, clinical research. Maurice?
Well, we can go right to our website, www.yalestudies.org, and there'll be plenty of information on there. It'll be by category topics such as diabetes or genetics, and under each title or category, you'll have the studies that are available. You click on this particular study, and if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there will be a number for the coordinator. Just give that coordinator a call, and they'll be able to give you any information that you need on the study and help you to enroll.
Excellent. Say that again,
www.yalestudies is all one word.org.
Excellent, excellent. Harry will give me the hook, and we had the pleasure of going into a second show at 12 o'clock. But Marcel, I don't want to cause people to not hear what we've said for the last 48, 50 minutes. Oftentimes when you do a show, you want to people will often only remember what you've said last. But I do want to break that commandment because you have a new title among the 7 or 8, 9 titles that you have pertaining to the Cancer Center. And I got to be upfront with you. Not that I have not been transparent before. In my mind, not speaking things, not saying things lucidly, clearly, without obfuscation has caused part of my problem. What I'm trying to say is, you have a new position at the Cancer Center. Is that new position to say to help all people live longer once they have cancer versus some people that are not living as long in the past?
Yeah, Tom. So you give me the deepest compliment when you said that I'm a health equity warrior, and so that's kind of the lens that I bring. Don't worry about all the different roles and titles. It's always about being in a space and trying to advocate for health equity. And so that's also what we'll be doing at the Cancer Center, is joining many others already on that mission to both prevent cancer, right, and also make sure that any disparities that we know have existed, that we can close and eliminate those. So more to come.
But for me, the word disparities is kind of a sugar-coated, is a sugar-coated obfuscation that people have died because of not getting the same treatment. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, I think yes, as a health equity researcher, that is absolutely what our creed is, that we have bias in our systems within healthcare, without healthcare, that drive negative outcomes for people of color in our country, and that we need to address that. And so that's full on the work that we are doing.
Excellent. But thank you. And so you'll be back to talk about that.
Thanks for continuing to have me back, Tom. It's always a great pleasure to talk with you.
Maurice, kind of last word, and I enjoy the opportunity to smile a little bit each day, because sometimes one can become, I can't speak for others, but one can become very depressed and sad. So this might be the moment for all of us to kind of share our smiles and find ways that we can still be warriors in our own way, one way or the other. But Maurice, any last words before we conclude? And thanks again for sharing.
As we said, the greatest commandment to man was to love their neighbor as their self. So wearing your mask helps to protect not only you, but protect others. Remember, some people are asymptomatic. They're walking around carrying the virus, but you can protect yourself by wearing your mask and continue to wash your hands. And let's be educated making medical decisions. And that's the one thing I would want my community to continue to keep in mind. Always be educated when you make a medical decision.
Excellent. Marcella?
Perfect. Whatever Maurice says. Everybody be well. Get your flu vaccines this year, friends.
Maurice, you paid her well. You paid Marcella.
I'm happy to work for him.
You paid her off good. I'm telling you, man.
Great one, everyone.
3.5 FM in New Haven.
Understand what